Tanaiste, as you know, Bank of Ireland today announced a plan to sell or return to the state €1.8 billion. And this is welcome, and I hope that you and your government put the money to good use. However, I think as we get ready to take this money back from Bank of Ireland, we need to be very cognizant as to where some of it has come from. Because some of it has come from citizens whose lives have been ruined by the behaviour of Bank of Ireland. Tanaiste, of the banks that have appeared before the Finance Committee, Bank of Ireland is unique in refusing to offer 0% on the portion of a mortgage in distress that is shelved. It's the only bank that has refused to do it. At the same Finance Committee meeting, Tanaiste, in September, I went through with the Chief Executive the so-called restructures that Bank of Ireland was offering. We went through 90% of them, and he agreed on the record that in all of those cases, the borrowers would end up paying more money back to Bank of Ireland, in at least 90%, and I believe probably closer to 100%. So for borrowers and families whose problem is they've got too much debt, Bank of Ireland's solution is for those families to pay Bank of Ireland more money than they would have had they not got into trouble. And Tanaiste, when I talk to practitioners who are working very hard every day to try and help families and individuals restructure their mortgages, I often ask them, is there any one bank that you would say is doing everything it can not to act according to the spirit of what the government has asked for? And I hear the same thing every time. Bank of Ireland, Bank of Ireland, Bank of Ireland. Tanaiste, right now, families all over Ireland with unsustainable debts are in a banking lottery. And those who were unfortunate enough to do business with Bank of Ireland and to trust Bank of Ireland during the bubble are families who are being squeezed harder than families who did business with other banks. Now, the Irish people, as you know, Tanaiste, made a lot of money available to Bank of Ireland, and €1.8 billion of this was to deal specifically with residential mortgages. When Bank of Ireland came before us in the Finance Committee, their figures showed that they had made a provision for half of this amount on residential mortgages. In other words, they said, we've got your €1.8 billion, and we're going to use all of this €1.8 billion because we acknowledge that we're not going to get back about half the money from distressed mortgages.
Thank you, Deputy.
But rather than act as the government has asked, Tanaiste, Bank of Ireland's explicitly stated policy is that it will not engage in any debt write-down. Practitioners are telling me that Bank of Ireland drag their heels at every opportunity they have. So my question, Tanaiste, is this. Do you believe that it is acceptable for Bank of Ireland to be acting in this way? And if you don't believe it's acceptable, are there tangible measures that your government can take to stop them? Thank you.
Thank you. Tanaiste.
Well, first of all, the Minister for Finance, on behalf of the state, has concluded negotiations on the sale and redemption of preference shares in the Bank of Ireland. This transaction will see that the state will recoup a premium on the initial €1.837 billion investment. A press release was issued this morning to mark the start of the sale process. These sale and redemption processes are currently underway, and the exact return to the state will depend on the outcome of the two separate capital market book build exercises that form part of these processes. As the process is currently underway, I'm limited in what I can say, but I'm sure that when the process is concluded, the Minister will come to the House and update it fully. The process involves the sale of €1.3 billion of the preference shares to private investors, the redemption of €537 million of the preference shares, which will be financed by the bank through the placing of new equity. The successful conclusion of this transaction will see the state exit its €1.837 billion of preference shares held in Bank of Ireland at a profit. build further confidence in Ireland's recovery, strengthen our return to normal market funding, and I acknowledge the welcome that Deputy Donnelly has given for that process. In relation to the ongoing engagement between banks and individual borrowers, and particularly families that continue to have mortgage difficulties and continue to need to find a way out of that. The Central Bank, as you know, has set targets for each of the banks to conclude agreements with families who are in mortgage distress. We have put in place a range of measures, new legislation, personal insolvency service, non-judicial debt settlement arrangement, and we have made it very clear to all of the banks that we want to see a conclusion brought to the mortgage distress and debt difficulties that very many families find themselves in. That has to be done, as I've said repeatedly here, on a case-by-case basis. We continue to engage with the banks, and through the Central Bank have engagement with them on what they are doing. We will continue to have that engagement with them, because what we want to see done is we want to see families lifted out from beneath the burden of debt. And that's a process that we want to see accelerated. We want to see all of the banks engaged in it, and no individual bank should be holding back or should be engaging in an approach to that that is less than fully engaging.
Supplementary question, Stephen Donnelly.
Thank you for your answer, Tanaiste. The targets, whilst I think were well meant, are being gamed by all of the banks. We know from the September Finance Committee that the way they've met the targets is they've issued tens of thousands of legal letters offering to evict people from their homes. And the Central Bank has colluded in this by accepting that a threatening legal letter counts as a genuine offer of a long-term sustainable restructure to the mortgage. But Tanaiste, I very much welcome what you said, where you say no bank should be seen to be holding back, because the reality is one bank at least is, and that bank is Bank of Ireland. And the thing is, Tanaiste, Bank of Ireland is not acting irrationally. It is the job of the board and the executive of Bank of Ireland to make them as much money as possible. That's their job. And a bank makes money by taking it in from people, giving them as low an interest rate as possible, lending it out to people, charging as high an interest rate as possible, and then squeezing and squeezing and squeezing as necessary to get that money back. That's the banking model. So I don't blame Bank of Ireland for acting the way they are acting. I wish they would act like the other banks, including the commercial banks, but the reality is they're not. And the executive team of that bank have taken a very clear line, which is on the record at the Finance Committee, where they said, we are not engaging in debt write-down, we are not doing these things, and the practitioners on the street are saying they are dragging their heels. So I welcome the fact that you say no bank should be allowed, because if we have a bank which clearly is dragging its heels and which is publicly stating that it is going to do other than the government stated intention, which is debt write-down, as stated by Minister Shatter during the debate on the Insolvency Act last year, you have to ask, what are you therefore going to do? So can I ask you, on the basis that you've said no bank should be dragging its heels, and on the basis that we have very solid evidence that says Bank of Ireland is dragging its heels, and the knock-on effect of that is that families all over the country are being squeezed and squeezed in ways they are not if they were fortunate enough to borrow from other banks. What can you tangibly do about it in the coming months and weeks? Thank you.
Tanaiste, final reply.
First of all, you used two phrases, Deputy Donnelly, that registered with me. One is where you describe banks, as you say, acting rationally, and you said that is the banking model. I disagree with you in this respect. I think that was the banking model. That was, if you like, the approach that one would have expected banks acting rationally. But as you know, and as we all know, the banks, when they were acting rationally in that way, found themselves in a position where they ended up having to come to the state for assistance. And therefore, I think we are in a situation where the banks do have, largely because of the commitment that was made to them, the fact that they were bailed out by the state, by taxpayers' money, I believe that the banks have a community, a social responsibility, call it what you will. And I believe that that responsibility is in large part measured, and you gave some of the figures here, by the amounts which were provided for the banks to resolve mortgage distress, and I believe that they should get on and do that. We have set targets through the central bank for the banks to deal with distressed mortgage holders. You asked specifically about what we can do to ensure that that is complied with. We have an engagement at government level. It's through the Minister for Finance and Department of Finance, and on some occasions the Economic Management Council, and certainly through the Central Bank, to continue that engagement with the banks until we see the mortgage distress problem resolved. And of course, there is also the degree of public accountability which is exercised through the Oireachtas Finance Committee. And I want to commend the work of the Finance Committee in bringing the banks before them and ensuring that there is public accountability. Because this isn't just a matter that can be dealt with and discussed behind closed doors somewhere. This is a matter which is of public interest, in which public money has been committed to the banks, and I believe it is right and proper that they appear regularly before the Finance Committee to account publicly for what they are doing.
That concludes leaders' questions.